So I'm half Dominican, half Nicaraguan. Both sides of my family are kind of, I would say, polar opposites. On my dad's side of the family, they grew up very poor. My dad would always tell me the story of like how Hurricane George came through and how they had to like nail down their roofs because, you know, their roofs were metal, and how they had to, like, the older brothers would have to hold down the roof with a piece of string so that it wouldn't blow away. And when it comes to my mom's side of the family, well, they had it rough too. Like, they grew up in rather good conditions up until a certain point. Then the Civil War broke out. They fled to Honduras. From Honduras, my grandfather crossed illegally to the United States. There he was jailed. When they realized that he actually had refugee status, they gave him a green card. He couldn't really find meaningful employment in the States, so then he crossed to Canada. There he found out that things are a little bit easier there, so he stayed, and then one by one, my family eventually crossed over. I love living in Toronto. Toronto is super multicultural. Fun fact about me, I didn't actually learn to speak English until I started school. So that was definitely an interesting experience. I always look back on it just like, it's just so mind-boggling, and people are always like, you were born and raised here but you didn't speak English. Yeah, no, I didn't. Like, my parents always spoke to me in Spanish, my grandparents as well. I grew up primarily with my grandparents. Their English is not that great. So, and my cousins and I, like, we're all around the same age group, and the same thing would happen at their house. Everybody would just speak in Spanish. So when we would communicate amongst each other, and it's a lot of like 13, 14 kids, and we're all just speaking in Spanish, we never really saw the necessity of learning another language at the age of like 4 or 5 until we actually had to. And that's when we actually started to learn. And it was interesting because you go to school, you meet different people, you meet people of different backgrounds, you meet people of different religions, and that's when you start to put all the puzzle pieces together of just how different your world at home and the world outside of your home truly is. And so if anybody knows me, I hate the cold. And because I hated going outside for recess, I was in cahoots with the librarian. So I would be like, hey, it's me again. Can I just chill out here and read? She'd be like, yeah, I'm just gonna take my lunch break. If you need me, I'm over here. So I would do that at every school that I was in. And it got to the point where I would read every book in the library, all of them. I would read all the picture books, but when it comes to like the chapter books, the history books, like once you read all of the chapter books, you got to move on to something else, which is the history books. And that basically created this love for history. And to this day, like, I love history. People often think that I'm not well educated. And yes, on the day-to-day, I do tend to speak with a lot of slang. They hear me once and they automatically assume that I'm not well educated. Yet, I'm a classical pianist. I have my bachelor's in law, and I'm currently doing an LLM. So yes, I am educated. I'm probably more educated than a lot of people my own age. But just because I choose to speak in a certain way, people will make the assumption that I'm actually not very well educated. Or because I look a certain way, people are going to assume that my comportment is going to come out as a very specific way. And that's not true. So I had a teacher in high school that was notoriously racist. Everybody knew this man was racist, and nobody ever did anything. So like my friends and I that had this man in high school, we had to, just like shrug off all the comments. But now that we look back at it and we realize what he was actually saying, we're like, yo, that was like, how this man used to just put me at the front of the classroom and be like, why are you late? Why can't Black people show up on time? Like, and just the whole class. Like, that's embarrassing. you are completely, and I went to a high school where there was maybe maximum 20 Black kids in the whole school. So I'm already isolated. I don't need you to continue to isolate me. And oh, the cafeteria, let's not even talk about that, because there was a table where obviously all the minority kids would sit together because that's the only place that we actually felt comfortable sitting where with each other. And everybody in the high school called it Cafrica. I didn't have any Black teachers in high school. I didn't have any Hispanic teachers in high school. I shouldn't be going to a place where I don't see myself. And it sounds, to some people, they're going to say, well, it doesn't matter. You're just trying to learn, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you're feeding me old history that's primarily white. Like, let's face it, what we learn about in school about history, like, for example, how we came to Canada. We learn about the one Aboriginal story about the turtle in the sand. And that's just about it. Did we learn about the rest? No, we don't. We had to find out the hard way. And everything is told by the male white perspective, because the white male was the person that came to colonize us. And these are hard conversations to have. And at some point, like, we need to, this might seem a little harsh, but white people need to educate their kids on history. They really do. Because for example, my household, I knew everything before I even started school. We're told everything. We're told, brace yourself. We're taught, people are going to make fun of you because you look like this. We're taught, don't worry about this, this, and this. It's going to happen. Don't be shocked. Why am I getting a pep talk, or why am I being instructed to not go into shock when I get discriminated against, yet other kids can't learn about the history as to why all of these perceptions and stereotypes exist? And they're not ready to say, the white man came and colonized us. They came and they basically exterminated the indigenous. They came and they imposed their rules and their sanctions. Hell, white women weren't even thought of as people for the longest time. And even when we look at feminism, it was white women and then everyone else. So at this point, we need to learn about the real history. There needs to be an education reform that actually teaches us about all of this. I don't know why we're still sugarcoating it. There needs to be substantial change, and only that way will we end up making changes, systematic changes. When I ended up going to university, I ended up going to York University for 1 year. There, I took a course called Music and Culture, something like that. But it's a very interesting analysis of how music evolved because of culture. So not because of the music itself, but how the different interactions in the world played a part in music in general. And I found it very interesting, but at the same time, there was always this underlining thing that just didn't feel right in all of those classes. And it was that there was always a portion of history that wasn't being told. And I think that portion of history always tended to be the disenfranchised point of view. So that really made me aware of where the power is. And that was the moment where I was like, my thing is, I always like to help people. So how am I going to change the world? So I was like, got it. I'm going to go to law school. I studied my ass off. I applied, and I ended up going to the Dominican Republic because it does not snow there. And I think that my schooling has definitely motivated me to take a more proactive role in fighting injustice and not being so complacent with the systematic abuse that exists. So when I was in the Dominican, I had a bad habit of looking at all the dogs on the streets. It was such a bad habit because they're just like roaming around doing whatever. And they're so cute. Like it kind of created this little soft spot for me. And it got to the point where I was like, dog, dog. And I would just pull over and pick it up and take it to a vet. And we had so many dogs that we were like, we can't keep all the dogs. Like, what are we supposed to do in an apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment with 6 dogs and 4 people? Like, this is just not this is not viable. So then we started looking for people to adopt here in Canada. And that's basically how the Simba Project came about. And the name comes from the first dog that we rescued. So he was found in a garbage can, him and his little brother, and he was the cutest he was like, he would fit in my hand when I first picked him up. So adorable. And he ended up dying of meningitis when he was about a year old. So he had all of his shots up to date. One day he just kind of went limp. We had to look at the positive. We couldn't dwell on the fact that he was gone. We had to look at the good. And the good was, at least he wasn't hit by a car. At least he was surrounded by people that loved him. At least he was comfortable. At least, like, we know that we did our best. And we were like, it should be like that for everyone. So we need to be a proactive role in getting these animals to safety. So that's basically how it came about. And as of now, we've transported around, I would say, over 40 dogs